Hello, and welcome to the short introduction into the 7 influencing techniques that will form the basis of your influencing skills program. These techniques are based upon the research of Professor Robert Cialdini from the University of Arizona, who is a social psychologist and a renowned expert on influencing. My name is Sharon Young, and I'll be taking you through 7 techniques today, and then giving you some tips on how you can use these moving forward. Much of what's included in this program are looking at the responses that human beings are almost programmed to make. In the busy, complicated world that we live in, we don't have time to evaluate everything, and so our minds make up shortcuts, almost like you have on a computer sometimes. When they see certain things or hear certain things, there's automatic behaviour happens and we will tend to behave in certain ways. These influencing techniques take advantage of these automatic behaviours that people have. We tend to use these quite often naturally without us realising. What we want to try and get you to do as part of this programme is to recognise these different techniques in more detail and to think consciously about when you're going to use them and when might be the right occasion to use them. So let me take you now into the first technique, which is all about power. A lot of people potentially think that power is just about people who've got positions of power. What we talk about on our program is actually there are a range of different power levels that you can use to engage people and to influence people. Certainly, positional power is one of those, and that's when people have got authority vested in them and that people can make them do things because it's their job. They're the people that have got responsibility for giving you reward or for disciplining you. And quite often you'll find that people will say yes to someone in a position of power, even if they're not sure it's the right thing to do. There have been examples of first officers sometimes on planes that have had crashes where they've done what the captain has told them even though they didn't think it was the right thing to do. Secondly, we have expert power. And this is when you use your knowledge or expertise. That people actually listen to you because you're an expert. Take, for example, the fact that you're listening to me now. And the fact that we mentioned at the beginning of this session that Professor Cialdini is an expert on this. People like to listen to experts and they realise that these are things that are worth listening to. The challenging thing with expert power is it's not when you think you're an expert, it's when other people think you're an expert. So you need to make sure that you are putting yourself across in such a way that people recognise you as being an expert. The third one is political power. And in this sense, political power is really talking about networking. So it's all very well being a great expert, but if you don't get out there and you don't meet people and you don't make the most of those connections, then you're not really going to get the benefit from that. And you may have heard often in an organisation, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I would say it's a bit of both. You need to have that expert power, but actually if you've got the political networking power as well, it's really good. The third one we have then is personal power. And this is very much around self-awareness, that being comfortable in your own shoes, being aware of who you are, and being aware of what are those things that drive you and what motivates you, demotivates you, and managing that. You could link that potentially to emotional intelligence. The final one then is physical power. And what we talk about here really is around your personal power and presence. So how do you come across when you meet people? Are you clear on what's the brand that you want to put across? And do you deliver the things that you say in a manner that reflects that brand? And my view is certainly that if you have those 4 things, if you have the expert power, the personal power, the political power, and the physical power, that can be far more powerful than simply having the positional power. So take a little bit of time to have a read of the notes around this. There'll be more details in the pack. But for now, that's an initial introduction into the power side of influencing techniques. The next one we move on to is vision, enthusiasm, and emotion. Think about people like Martin Luther King that we've got here. How well do they influence people? Think about those speeches that he made. He had such a really clear vision of what he wanted to do. He talked about it in terms that excited people and communicated it with passion, showed that enthusiasm, and actually brought emotion into things. A lot of people feel that we can't use emotion in business, but actually research shows that we quite often tend to make our decisions based on emotion, and then we justify them with logic rather than the other way around. So showing when you feel emotions about something in a positive way, demonstration that something is really important for you, is a very good way of influencing other people. One word of warning here, though. Sometimes, if you just have enthusiasm without having any logic behind that, people can get a little bit put off. So it's really important to make sure that you're keeping engaged with the audience to see if you are bringing them along with you, or whether actually you're losing them a little bit because you're being too enthusiastic. The third technique is around reciprocation, sometimes called the favour bank. It's just one of those things as human beings. If someone does us a favour, we feel like we've got to give them or do something back for them. We don't like to be indebted to someone. How many times have you gone to dinner with someone and had a really boring evening because they've invited you over? You feel like you've got to invite them back. One researcher did an exercise in this, and they sent Christmas cards to a group of people they'd never met, just picked their names out of a phone book and put their contact details on the back. And it was amazing how many people sent them a Christmas card back, purely because they wanted to reciprocate. So reciprocation is that give and take in relationships, and it works better when you've got long-term relations moving on there. So just think about people that are your stakeholders. What are things that I can do for these people that will build up my favour bank? So when potentially I need something from them, they're going to maybe say yes to me more likely than they will to others. One word of warning here as well, though. The person who does the favour will remember it far longer than the person that you do the favour for. So don't do someone a favour and then 3 years down the line expect them to reciprocate. It doesn't always work that way. The fourth technique is now commitment and consistency. It's one step further than reciprocation. As human beings, we've got an overwhelming desire to act consistently with previous commitments that we've made, both to people or to decisions. We like to act in ways that show that, yes, we are being consistent to those things. So what you want to do is find a way of getting people to make a commitment. If you can't get them to commit to the whole thing that you want to influence on, get them to maybe to make a small commitment to maybe, can I call you back this time next week? Would you be able to have a look at this document and let me know what you think? And what happens is in time, people get used to making small commitments to you, and it then becomes easier for them to make bigger and more in-depth commitments to you. An example of this is someone saying down the pub, oh, you know so-and-so, they're always so generous, and guess who's going to buy the next round? It's that kind of thing that we really like to be able to show people, yes, we are reliable, we will meet our commitments. So think about little commitments you can get people to make or build them up to the big commitments that you really want ultimately. The fifth one is actually two techniques in one, scarcity and contrast. Anyone in a sales environment who's ever been into a sale will probably understand the concept of scarcity. It's a funny old thing, but something that we might not want when there's loads of it around, all of a sudden it becomes scarce and we think this thing that we really must have above all else. Things like Blue Cross sales are pure examples of this. You've got to buy it today, otherwise it's not going to be here anymore. How many people have gone out and bought something that they weren't sure about, just in case they missed out on it? All the selling channels on TV really apply to this, but they have a little number down the bottom that tells you how many of these items are left. When there's maybe 200, you're not so interested. When it gets down to the last 10, you might think, okay, maybe I really want to buy that. So whether it's to do with deadlines, limited availability, and scarcity is a very, very strong thing to pull. One thing to be aware of here, though, is if you pull this too much, people will get bored. So think of, say, DFS, for example. Has anyone ever known there not to be a sale going on at DFS? I tend to not take any notice of them anymore. So use scarcity with scarcity. Actually, scarcity works particularly well with senior people. So the other way of using scarcity is by showing people what they might lose if they don't agree to something. So it's fine, we can go ahead with the proposal, but what it will mean is that we won't get this, this and this. So you'll maybe lose sales figures of X amount. You won't get such and such an improvement. So showing people what they might lose out on actually quite often has a better impact than the traditional way of talking about features and benefits. The second half of this one then is contrast. So this can be comparing one thing with another. So putting the most expensive option first or the least attractive option first, and then coming with what you actually really want. So Cialdini and his research had an example of a scout who asked him to spend, I think it was $10 on a scouting event. Cialdini said, no, I don't really want to do that. And the scout said, well, would you pay $1 for this bar of chocolate? Okay. $1 in comparison to $10? Doesn't sound too bad. So it works with prices as well. If you want you've got three options and you want them to go for the middle one, have a more expensive option first. But if you've got something you think they're really not going to like, put that forward first and then say, well, we could do this. It automatically sounds more interesting. The sixth one then is around social proof, or what we sometimes call people like me. It links to the concept we have of stereotypes, that actually as human beings we feel the urge to associate ourselves with other people. We like to feel that we belong to certain groups or don't belong to certain groups. So if someone is wavering a bit about a decision, this is a really good one to help them sort of come down on one side of the fence or the other. So it's like, well, I'm not quite sure. Well, do you know so-and-so from accounts? Well, they thought it was a really good idea. And you can talk about this in terms of a person, a group of people, a department, an organisation. Sometimes it's useful for that final push. The thing you need to be aware of, though, is let's make sure that it is someone that person does associate with, or a group that person does associate with. Otherwise, you're going to have negative impact because they're not going to want to associate with them, so they're not going to go with the idea. So just be aware of that as you're using it. The final technique, then, is lighting a rapport, which is probably one of the most obvious ones. We are more likely to be influenced by someone that we like and have a rapport with, or someone that we think likes us. So there's always going to be people we have a natural rapport with, and that's great. But some people we find it more challenging. So we will look here at ways that you can build that rapport where it doesn't naturally exist. Things like making positive comments, finding common ground, common interest that you can share with that person, matching the way that they say things, matching their body language, all those kind of things to actually build up your liking and rapport with someone. So that's the 7 techniques. Expertise, authority and power, vision, enthusiasm and emotion, reciprocation, commitment and consistency, scarcity and contrast, social proof, or people like me, and liking and rapport. There was more information about this in your pack, so we'd like to take a little bit of time now to read through that information and to understand this in a little bit more detail. You'll then find in your pre-work in exercise 4 a couple of activities to really help you think about this prior to the program starting. So I'd like you to think about which of these techniques do you use regularly and what sort of situations do you use them in. When might you be able to use them in the future? And finally, we'll actually have within your packs some information about stakeholder planning. We'd like you to start thinking about some of your key stakeholders and start to fill in the table that we have there, looking at which of the techniques that you currently use with that person and which are the ones that you maybe think you could start to learn a bit more about in future. We'll then explore all of this a lot more in depth on the program, and you'll have plenty of opportunities to practice both with your colleagues and with other professional actors. I look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye.